All right.
Perfect. And we are on.
Good evening and welcome to the February 23rd, 2021 meeting of the Stow Board of Selectmen. With me in person here tonight, we have Ellen Sturgis, Courtney Fresha, Megan Birch-McMichael, Denise Demkowski, and remotely we have Mr. Salvi. So I'm going to start off with public input. If there is anybody that has public input, can raise your hand. And Ellen.
I just want to let people know we're doing a volunteer information night a week from tomorrow, March 3rd at 7 o'clock. It'll be posted on the website with a Zoom link. And it's an opportunity for people who might be thinking about joining a board or running for a position to meet with people who are in those positions or on those committees now. So we've asked every committee, particularly those that have openings, to come and do a little description. And then there'll be time to have both sort of group discussion as well as we're trying to figure out, depending on how many people join us, we'll do some breakout rooms and you'll get a chance to ask more deeper questions if you'd like. And we've also asked the committees to submit some information in advance that we'll have available for everybody. So again, it'll be on the website in the next day or two, but just mark your calendars for Wednesday, March 3rd, 7 o'clock.
And go on to chairman's comments and for the.
You have someone raising their hand.
Yes, Dan.
I don't know whether it should be in the public portion or when you get to the agenda item about the CPC funds, but I'm here to speak in support of the request to support the Halleck Point and Healthy Lake Boone initiative. I don't know if you want me to say something now or wait until that time.
You can wait for that. We'll do it when we have.
Right.
I'll make sure I try to remember you, I should say.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Ellen and Town Clerk's Office, Linda and Deb for working on this volunteer night. It's very important and I think they're putting a lot of work into it and I think it should be a very good thing. Without the volunteers that we have here in town, stepping forward for all the seats on the boards and all the committees, we would be spending a heck of a lot more money and we would have a lot less representation from people in town. So if you're even remotely interested in what the town does, I would strongly suggest that you try to attend that meeting. If not, the Selectmen's Office can also provide you information on volunteer opportunities. One of the other things is that nomination papers are available now at the Town Clerk's Office. This year we have positions that are open on the ballot. We have Board of Selectmen, 2 seats for 3 years each. The Board of Assessors, there are 2 positions that will be on the ballot. One for a currently vacant position expiring in 2023 and another one for a 3-year term. We have a 1-year or a 3-year term on the Board of Health and a 3-year term that's open on the Nashoba Regional School District. Last day to get papers is March 17th. And in order to get put on the ballot, you need to return 40 signatures that will then be verified by the town clerk. And papers are due back by March 19th. Next up, we have Chief Sallese and police use of force, an updated policy. Chief, are you there?
I am here.
And you're looking very good with those stars.
Well, thank you very much. I try to keep them polished. So yeah, no, thank you very much. As you are aware that the police reform legislation here in Massachusetts provides for a lot of statutory mandates regarding different aspects of how police are going to be doing their job. One of them is the use of force by law enforcement personnel. So I put with a guidance of the Mass Chiefs and what they came out with, put together the additional definitions and changes to our use of force policy. These are pretty much going along statewide. They're one of many policies that I'm going to be bringing forward to the Board of Selectmen over the next few weeks and months. We have a lot of change that is going to be coming down from our department. And even though we're making these changes tonight, with the creation of the post commission that is going to be happening, they could update their regulations and require police departments to be doing more or different things. So I may be presenting the same policy in a different fashion coming up in the next year or so. But right now, all the regulations that went into effect back in December are outlined in the letter that I sent to the select board and added to the policy that's already presented to you guys. There's a lot of changes, and there's like 40 pages in the policy. These will be, if approved tonight, this will be pushed out to the department tonight. Anyone have any questions on it?
Anybody have any questions?
Also, just so you know, I did leave in, one of the distinct things between us and the state is I did leave in on the duty to intervene, that I still left in that it's not only just the officers that have to be have a duty to intervene. Again, it's all civilians, employees and volunteers through the police department.
That's great.
Any comments, Jim?
Yeah, did I interrupt somebody else?
Nope.
Evening, Chief, how are you?
I'm well, Jim. Thank you.
I just wanted to highlight one thing and also check that I'm understanding it correctly. So my memory is that in the immediate aftermath of the George Floyd incident, we made some changes to the policy, and chokeholds at that time were allowed as part of a response to the use of deadly force. But if I'm reading this correctly, there's an important change made, which is that chokeholds are not allowed at all, even in deadly force situations. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. That's great. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? In that case, we hadn't picked anybody to do motions
Oh, I'll
and
do
seconds.
motions tonight.
Thank you, Megan.
I'll do them. Are you ready for a motion?
I'm ready for a motion.
All right, I move to approve the updated use of force policy as presented by Stow Police Chief Michael Sallese.
Second.
Any further discussion? I'll just add my 2 cents. Thanks for bringing this forward, Mike, and keeping on top of it.
Oh, thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And Jim votes aye, so it's unanimous. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks,
Or thank you, Chief.
Thanks,
Thank
Chief.
you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Alright, we're probably a little bit early. 7:15 for the Town Administrators Joint Boards meeting. You know what, since we've got,
Can we do minutes or
Can
something?
we do minutes?
I was gonna say, let's go for the minutes.
Quick question, so Joyce will be doing minutes moving forward? Okay. I have an editorial kind of sticking with either select person and last name, or actually I would just prefer select person and last name, as opposed to Megan or whatever, just for continuity's sake throughout.
So we have, first set of minutes we have is from February 9th, 2021. I went through them, I was pretty good with them. Are there any?
You have a hard copy. They're not,
Comment?
are they in the packet or are they in a separate?
They are, it's
They're in the packet.
page, hold on a minute, it's page 52.
Oh, see, I went too far. Okay.
I have a comment on page 1 at the bottom, the promotion of Darren Thraen. Second sentence, it says, the position will still be on patrol and responding. I just wonder if that couldn't be a better subject, like the lieutenant or the person in that position, or
Yeah.
something like that to be clear.
Did you want to look at what Courtney?
Yeah.
Courtney, where were you at in the minutes?
So it was on page 1 of the minutes. At the bottom of the page, the paragraph that's promotion of Darren.
Yeah.
So the second sentence, it says the position will still be on patrol. I just thought it might read better later if it said either
How about-
lieutenant or.
How about the lieutenant will still be on patrol?
Yeah.
That probably takes care of it.
That was.
Any other comments or suggestions on those?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, when I raised the concern about the draft report for this selectmen, about Pine Bluff, I didn't mean to say it was written poorly. I mean, I have concerns about when people talk about vandalism down at the lake, and I use the term racist, and I just want to be clear that that was, that's not about how it was written, that's how I believe that it is perceived. So I don't want anybody to be, I think it was misunderstood what I was trying to say, so, and if it feels a little too incendiary, I'm willing to change the word to, basically just leave, I mean, maybe we just leave if we could just change it saying that the wording in the draft that referred to out-of-towners was loaded, period. And then I made a suggestion on how it should read, so.
How about instead of loaded, could be improved? Does that make sense?
Well, what I was saying was the reference
Mhm.
to out-of-towners was a loaded statement, meaning it was implying something more than.
Okay.
What would you say the reference to out-of-towners seemed to imply more than,
I think it's fair if she just says
Say-
was a loaded statement, because
Yeah.
I think it's a draft.
Yeah.
Like, that's the draft version of it, and that's
Sure.
what you're referring
Right,
to, that's not the actual version that's gonna go out into the public, so I think it's fair to say that it was loaded and
yep, it's, wait,
I'm fine with
vernacular,
that.
it's all right.
Any comments, Jim?
No, I'm fine with those changes.
In that case, I'll accept a motion.
Alright, I move to accept the meeting minutes of the February 9th, 2021 meeting with amendments.
Second,
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
aye,
Jim?
Aye.
So unanimous. And we have the minutes from February 16th, our 8-minute meeting. Uh, Any comments, suggestions? In that case, I'm willing to accept a
A
motion.
motion, I move to accept the meeting minutes of the February 16th, 2021 meeting as drafted.
second,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye,
And Jim, you were aye?
Right.
All right. All right, next up. The next item on our agenda is the Town Administrator's Joint Boards Meeting for the FY 2022 Financial State of the Town with the Board of Assessors, Capital Planning Committee, Finance Committee, Selectmen, Minuteman, and Nashoba Regional School Districts, pursuant to Article 4, Section 10 of the General Bylaws. This is meant to be a very high-level conversation at the beginning of budget season to help the town understand kind of where we're going. This is the town administrator's thing, but one of the things that we do want to try to do is keep any presentations to just a couple of minutes. This is meant to be a 50,000-foot view of where we stand at the moment, not getting into lots of details. Just so that we have some confirmation, do we have someone from the Board of Assessors?
That's me.
All right. Kristen, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Doing fine. Do we have representation from Capital Planning?
Yeah, Steve Jelinek's here, Tom.
Hello, Steve, how are you?
Good.
Do we have representation from the Finance Committee?
Yes, Erica Benedick is here.
Hello, Erica. I think the selectmen are well represented here. And do we have someone from the Minuteman Regional School District?
Alice DeLuca is here.
Hello, Alice. And do we have someone from the Nashoba Regional School District?
Yes, we have a couple here. Rich Eckel is a school committee member, Pat Maroney, our business manager, and myself, Brooke Lynch, the superintendent.
Hello, all of you. It doesn't mean you get 3 minutes each. All right, and that being done, I will now turn this over to our town administrator, Denise.
Thank you. So Tom, while I do this, if you can keep an eye on the participants and admit anyone that joins, that would be helpful.
It'll be at the top of the screen. If someone is there, it'll just pop up.
Yeah, you'll just click admit when someone pops up there.
All right.
So I'm going to share my screen. To start my presentation. Okay. Let me move this for you all to see. All right, so thank you. I have reviewed the last several years of these presentations to see what information is normally presented. I will present it slightly differently and probably a little different bits of information than what you're used to. But I will start by just sort of giving us some of our key financial indicators. So the first thing we can see where our free cash has been over the last 5 years. You'll see we are primarily healthy and well above the 2 million mark. For fiscal 21, we decreased by about 500,000 from fiscal 20, just different factors, and there are different issues that affect free cash every year, but still very healthy, great numbers for the town. Our stabilization account, again, 5-year snapshot. We were hovering around 900,000 for several years, but in fiscal 20, we utilized 436,000 for the lower village project. So obviously that has brought our balance down to just over 500,000. So what does that mean for us? So available funds as a percentage of the budget. So the target range for rating agencies and best practices is between 10 and 15% of the general fund budget. So as you can see, we have decreased down to 8.96% for fiscal 21. One of my goals is to get that number back up to be in that healthy 10 to 15% range. Our snow and ice account, a snapshot. I went back a little bit further on this so you can see the blue represents what was budgeted, the green represents what we have spent year after year. We, in fiscal 15 and 16, were budgeted at 150, and that increased to 165,000 starting in fiscal 17, which we have remained static since that point. Obviously, you can tell we always overspend the snow and ice budget. We are legally allowed to deficit spend that account, but I will touch upon that a little bit later about what I would recommend we do with this account and how we should sort of deal with that going forward. The OPEB trust fund. So for those of you not familiar with the OPEB account, that is the other post-employment benefits. So that is current employees' future health insurance as a retiree. So there is a liability associated with that. You can see our current liability is $7.4 million, and we have $822,000 in our trust fund. We have been making a contribution back since fiscal 17, and I would recommend that we continue that. What the right number is, right now there's no requirement to do the minimum funding. So we've been budgeting about $235,000 or $230,000 a year. I would recommend we stick to that number or somewhere around that. But it is good practice, and it is quite necessary that we do make an effort to fund that on an annual basis. So our recent actuary was done, and that's a 7.4. We do have an actuary. They revise our numbers every year based on estimates of employees when they are estimated to retire, what their marital status is, what their life cycle is expected to be. So there's a number of factors that are taken into consideration to determine what our liability is. So what does that all mean for us? Excuse me. So fiscal 21, town meeting adopted a $28,817,845 budget. You can see the breakdown. I'm sure no one is surprised by this. 70% of the town's budget goes into education. Public safety is next. Then we have debt, then general government, public works, and other. This is fairly common. If you go to any city or town in Massachusetts, you're going to see a pie chart that looks almost identical to this. And how does that break down as far as revenue? So we have, again, no one should be surprised by this, 90% of our revenue is from taxes. So our taxes, primarily residential, fund 90% of what we operate with. After that, it's local receipts, which are your permits, fees, sort of the daily work that we do here. Then we have 3% of other, which is if we appropriate free cash for items, if we use any sort of other funds to offset sale of lots, things like that. And then finally, we have our tiny little sliver of state aid, which represents 2% of our budget. Fiscal 22, now some of these numbers have been estimated that are still unknown, and every day we tweak the numbers. But what does that mean? That means that there's an increase requested of 4.17%. I do expect that to come down dramatically. When I was putting this together, we did not have school numbers, which we'll touch upon, but our Nashoba school numbers are much better than we were estimating. As far as our capital requests, the non-CPC requests have come in just under $1 million with requests. And Steve will discuss that shortly with the requests that have come in. So, let's now look ahead. The Minuteman assessment is up more than 20%. So it's a big jump, it's a big number. I know Alice is here. We have Dr. Bequillian will be at our next meeting on the 9th to make his full budget presentation. But that is something that we will need to address. Our property and casualty insurance. I spoke to our insurance company today, and they are estimating over a 10% increase. They're still working on those numbers. We had 2 large claims that have a high risk associated with them, so that is affecting our rates. COVID. So the effects in COVID are expected to linger for some time. I made that sort of a neutral face because right now it's a budget neutral impact to us. We did receive CARES Act funding, so we've covered most of our our needs with COVID funding. I don't want to use the phrase recession-proof, but small towns like ours are generally recession-proof because our residents can afford to pay their taxes. We have very little business that's affected by any type of recession. So for us, we do well. We don't have hotels, we don't have meals tax that we rely on with our budget. And as you saw earlier, we only have a 2% state aid that we rely on. So if there are cuts to state aid, it's not a huge impact as it would be in other communities. Our tax collection rate is still high and has not been adversely affected by COVID. So people are still paying their bills, whether it's on their own or through mortgage companies. So that is still, those revenues are still coming in. And as I articulated, that is 90% of our revenue right off the bat. And Nashoba assessment is expected to be minimal, if any increase at all. And Brooke will touch upon that shortly. So that is huge for us. I was expecting an increase and looking through and getting sort of the preliminary numbers, we may not have an increase, we may have a decreased assessment, which will sort of cover any gap for the other increases that we have been looking at. So, my recommendations, I did touch upon some of these at our last meeting, which I wasn't really aware that I should have done them at this meeting instead, but that's okay. So what do I recommend that we do? That we continue to look for ways to be more efficient, effective, and cost-effective. Doing that would be, putting our permitting and licensing online, continuing to find ways to use technology to enhance our services at lower costs and just to make things more efficient for both the employees and the residents. Find ways to be more open and transparent. Again, making use of our website, putting more information up there, being more accessible, making more services 24/7 so that people can, conduct business from home as much as they can. Additionally, we talked about briefly in the past that one of my goals is to make our budget more transparent. One of the recommendations that I have is to eliminate sort of the separate line item of that education incentive and start working that into the existing employee salary so that their budget line properly reflects what they're making, and then get rid of that sort of lump sum payment. Same thing with stipends, folks don't, when you're looking at the budget to vote it, you don't know who's getting stipends because it's just not clearly articulated. Now, that won't all happen for this budget cycle, but you'll see that those are the things I'd like to implement. As I mentioned, we should continue to fund the OPEB trust account with an annual appropriation of at least $235,000. My recommendation will be that that comes from free cash, and that's a healthy use of free cash on an ongoing basis. That we make an annual appropriation to the stabilization account. Fiscal '22, I am recommending $200,000 from free cash go to stabilization. Again, I think every year as our salaries are increasing, as our expenses are increasing, obviously the general fund budget is increasing. If we don't continue to put money into stabilization, we're gonna fall below that 10 to 15% range, and that really is our target. I am recommending that we increase the snow and ice budget to better reflect what is being spent. Just because we can deficit spend a line doesn't mean we should, year after year after year. I think $200,000, probably $225,000 is more the target number where we should be. But I'm gonna recommend that we increase this fiscal year up $35,000 to $200,000. Again, as salary and overtime costs increase, as expenses increase, we are not increasing that. I mean, we did 5 years ago, but 5 years is a good increment to start increasing it, because everything we spend over that $165,000, we have to find somewhere and make up. So I'd rather budget appropriately. If we don't need it, it falls to free cash and we have it to use the following year. But let's be honest, we're in New England and we're always gonna need that money. So I would recommend that we fund that more appropriately. As I mentioned at the last meeting, I am requesting that we fund the Assistant Town Administrator, HR Director position to address personnel matters and bring us up to legal, equitable, and necessary standards that we are lacking here. We've started doing it with policies, started putting in procedures in place, but it really is a full-time job to get, we have 135 employees that, there should be somebody that they have that they can go to that, again, is doing performance evaluations, overseeing job postings, new hires, onboarding, and so on. My recommendations, we fund a highway position that will be split between the highway department and the cemetery. Additionally, I would like to spend some time in fiscal '22 working towards formally consolidating the cemetery and the highway department into a Department of Public Works. I think we are, again, it goes sort of back to the efficiency and the effectiveness that we can share resources, we can share staffing. We do that now, but in a less formal way. That if there's a situation that staff can be reassigned, if there's a funeral that needs to be attended to, you can reassign staff there. It just makes things work a little bit better, and we can, share equipment. We have dual pieces of equipment for different departments right now, and quite frankly, the equipment's expensive, and we should look for better ways to do that. I recommend that we fund or support, and I will mention that, I misspoke at the last meeting, it's a reference outreach librarian for the Randall Library to oversee their online collections, programming, and marketing to reach both young and adult users. I mentioned support because in my conversations with Tina, she is going to be submitting this position as part of the Hale Trust request that she asks for every year. The Hale Trust was established for reference of the Randall Library. A reference librarian would fall within that category. So I do support the position. If the Hale Trust cannot cover all or some of it, I would commit to funding the rest of it, because I do think it's necessary to have here. But we may not need to fund that in the general fund, but it would still be an important position to add. And that is my sort of quick overview of where we stand and what we're looking for going into fiscal '22. So I will, before we sort of go to anybody else, if there are questions that I can answer now, I'm happy to do so.
Helen?
So, let's see, I guess on that last one with the reference outreach librarian, if the position's funded by the Hale Fund, does that impact the fact that they're a town employee, and how would you how do you manage, like, if it was a partially funded? Would the Hale Fund be putting money into the town budget to offset?
Yeah, so it's really no different than how we fund Stow TV folks, how we fund Krista with CPC. I mean, their money doesn't come from general fund, they come from sort of the other funding sources,
Okay.
and then it would just cover it. So we would just charge a different account for that position when we're processing payroll. That's really the only difference.
Okay. I'll hold on my other question.
Megan, Courtney?
That was a great presentation, thank you.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
I had just a couple of quick things, if nobody else does.
Go for it.
Go for it, Jim.
Denise, I just want to say, first of all, I'm seriously impressed not with what you, not just with what you said, but with how you said it. Frankly, PowerPoint, art class, and smiling faces. Hard move. The board, I like it. You've done several things I can't really imagine Bill doing, but using smiling and frowny faces is definitely up there. 3 quick points. Number one, I had a question about with like COVID. Frankly, I think you answered it, and I'm very pleased to see that it's neutral. A year or so ago, we were all afraid it was going to be disastrous with some reason, but I think you explained why it's neutral. That's great. On OPEB, I just wanted to point out, but I hope you found it. About 2 years ago, we hired a consultant who did an actuarial report on our OPEB liability and made some recommendations about changing the actuarially assumed rate of interest and the contributions. The contribution level you recommended, I think, is what that report recommends, so I'm hoping that means you found that report, but I just want to point it out to you.
So I do have the report. It's Odyssey Advisors, and they are used by many cities and towns. I've used them in the last 2 communities. I did find the report, I did go through it, and yes, 235 was their recommendation as a minimum that we should contribute.
Okay, great. And my only other point is a question. I don't have any problem with what you're saying about combining cemetery and highway into a DPW. I have always had the impression, and I'd be happy to hear that I'm wrong, that forming a DPW brings out bureaucratic changes like a board of public works. No, you're shaking your head no.
No, you do not need a Board of Public Works. Nope, there's no requirement for that. The only issue that we would have, and I'd have to look into it, usually when you consolidate and make a Department of Public Works, anything sort of Public Works related falls under that unless you specifically exempt it, which here would include sort of the Hudson Light and Power, because we're a part of a municipal light department. I would just have to figure out how that plays into it and whether we would need to have a defined sort of seat with them or not. But otherwise, you do not need any boards or anything like that.
Great, thank you, that's all I have.
You're welcome.
I'm good.
I will just add, I mean, I so love that presentation, because in whatever it was, 7 minutes, you made more clear the highlighted issues that our town needs to know. I mean, no offense to anybody who are, at least 3 of you are here, finance committee chairs, but maybe 4 actually in terms of history. That was the best finance committee presentation I've ever heard. I mean, it's like, oh, now I get it. So, sorry guys, but you know, anyway.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, right?
So appreciative.
I think snow and ice, I wondered every year, why is it we every year have to vote for it, so I'm very happy to hear that. I have just concerns, in terms of the highway cemetery thing, I think technology should be playing a big part of that, because there's a whole part that our current cemetery staff does that I don't understand why it's there, it's not efficient, it's not accessible, it's not technology, so I think there's more savings to be done there, so I'll leave it at that.
I would agree.
I'm done now.
Yeah, one of the things, I'll just bring up the snow and ice.
Yeah.
The thought process since I've been here is just, because you can deficit spend, rather than make the money available that someone might think that it's a great idea to spend it whether you need to or not. Keep it towards the lower side, because we have had years when we have underspent it.
From that chart, it didn't show.
Not many, but we have in the past, and it's just one of the things that, rather than just keep ratcheting it up every year to the highest level, as you can see, the gap seemed to be getting a little bit less. A few years ago, when we had a lot of snow, it just shot through the roof. So, there are, I'm sure, pluses and minuses to both methods, but, just to give you thought process that we had used in the past.
But I think it makes sense now to do it this way, because especially if we are going to be, if we do underspend it, then it dumps back into free cash, and since we are, it seems like actually going to be spending more of the free cash, then I think that, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Well, there are some people that, especially in municipal government, feel that if you don't spend everything that you've been allocated, you're not doing your job.
No.
So,
Yes,
some.
but that's not the way I oversee departments, and they all know that that's not the case. Just because you have it doesn't mean you can spend it, not on my watch.
Well, and particularly in public safety, I mean, I think there was a number of years there where you could tell they didn't want to go out and sand or plow because they were running out of money. And that's not what public safety is about, I'm sorry if it's gonna cost more, but, there was a few years there, I was driving from Framingham to Stow, many nights a week, and it seemed like every time during a snowstorm, I'd come through from the Maynard to Stow line was absolutely obvious, because all of a sudden, oh, look, we haven't bothered to plow yet, so, I'd rather have the encourage highway to do what they need to do and not feel like someone's gonna breathe down their neck for not spending, not doing what they need to do, so. If we can just hire enough people to do it, that would be great.
I'm done. So, it's your meeting, Denise,
Oh.
if you,
So it does not matter, who would you like to hear from next? We have,
probably start on the list that we've got on the agenda.
alright, so we'll go to Kristen. Kristen, you're up.
Okay, so good evening, everybody, and the Board of Assessors portion of this presentation is to talk about new growth. And unfortunately, there's not a lot going on in the town right now in the way of construction projects. So for fiscal '21, growth was about $339,000. For fiscal '22, I hate to say it, but that's gonna be slashed probably in half. And we're looking at maybe between 150, possibly to 175, but it's gonna be a stretch to get there. So it's just due to lack of construction projects. I mean, there's a couple houses that are in construction progress right now that we've got a little bit of growth from. The rest is a few scattered permits that are complete, and the rest is what we picked up on cyclical rotation inspections, decks and sheds and patios and things like that. So, not our best growth year, but we have some, so we're nothing. That's pretty much, that's pretty much it. If it's not there, it's not there. And keep in mind, growth is as of 1/1/21 for fiscal '22. So, it had to be completed last month. So, if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer any.
I'm good.
Good.
Can anybody ask a question, or is it just for the selectmen at this point?
If you've got a quick one, Rich?
Yeah, sure, I was just curious what the townwide valuation was and what percentage it grew by.
I do not have a recap in front of me because I'm at home.
Oh, I do,
Get
wait a
that
minute.
for you.
I don't have last year's recap, but I have, that's okay. The total valuation, let me see, where are we? 1,447,656,322 is the fiscal 21 recap valuation of all classes.
All right, and I'll catch up with, thank you for that. I'll catch up with Kristen later about the percent increase, just curious.
Sure.
175,000 isn't much.
No, not much, right. That puts it in context.
Well, I probably do have it. Let me just see, I probably have it on the spreadsheet. Oh, no, I don't have the value, I have the dollar amount, sorry. Okay. All right, anything else for the assessors?
That is it.
Okay. Steve, how about we'll come to you to talk about capital?
Okay, I'm sorry I don't have a nice PowerPoint presentation. In fact, I'm actually sorry my camera doesn't appear to be working, but if you can hear my voice, I'll just give a quick overview. Yeah, as Denise mentioned, we're looking at just under $1 million in capital projects this year, 980,000 about to be exact. To give you some perspective, last year we spent, when the town approved 950,000, that was a bit of an unusual year, not quite as unusual as the year before that. But a typical year, we're in the neighborhood of $500,000 in capital projects. So again, a bit more this year than is typical for us. I do expect that number is going to come down somewhat. For instance, the fire department is looking to get a grant to cover their request for new turnout gear this year. About 45% of the request total this year is from the highway department for new vehicles. And the police department is also looking for some changes to their vehicles as well. About $180,000 is being requested by the building department, and that's to do the handicap doors in the town building and essentially rekey the whole town building, paint the police department, and look at funding for some studies to figure out what to do with the town's water system. And that's the water system that serves the town building, the library, the church, etc. So that figure of $980,000, of course, does not include CPC funded projects, of course, the town hall project being one of them. And it does not include anything from the school district with respect to any potential high school funding studies. That's the capital overview. Are there any questions?
Questions from the board?
Well, I guess it's sort of a question, I don't know, it's for Steve or for you, Denise, about the process this year for reviewing. I mean, I know capital planning goes through their review process and makes their recommendations. How do you look at that process or your interface?
Well, so I discussed all the requests with the departments when I met with them. I've had conversations with Steve. I missed their last meeting, but I'm trying to attend all of their regular meetings as well, just to be part of their discussion. And then my expectation would be that when they're sort of deliberating on their projects, that I would participate to weigh in to give them my recommendation. Obviously, they could take it or not, but I would like to weigh in on how I feel, the projects are, and what I feel is a priority for us. All right, anything else with capital? Erica, would you like to say anything for the finance committee?
Sorry. Good evening, everyone. We have just started getting into the budget process. We had our preliminary budget meeting with Denise last week, I think that was. So yeah, we'll be meeting with the departments in the coming weeks to go over all of their asks for this year, but so far no surprises, so I'm very pleased with the process so far. Denise is making it way too easy.
Alright. We have the board on there. Does anyone here wanna say anything? All right, and we have Alice, and I did see Dr. McQuillian sign on, so I don't know, Alice, if you'd like to speak and give us a brief overview.
It's nice to see all of your little Zoom tiles. So refreshing. We are fortunate for a cameo appearance from Dr. McQuillan, who just got done with the Bolton Zoom meeting. And so he is in fact able to give a brief overview relating to the Minuteman budget. Thank you, Dr. McQuillan, for being able to slide on in here.
Sure, just briefly, good to see y'all. I'll be with you on March 9th, I believe. Denise has put me on the agenda for there as well. But overall, the Minuteman operating budget is up about 2.4% next year. Our big increases are coming in regards to our MSBA project debt. Stow's assessment is up about 18.5%. And when we consider, some folks may know the history of our new regional agreement, some may not, but the enrollment from Stow has gone up more than 100%, but your assessment's only going up 18.4% because we now use a 4-year rolling average in the calculation of assessments. So that's moderating the increase. We have had a large increase in applications to Minuteman over the last few years, and that's continuing. We've already exceeded the design enrollment of the building. So one of our priorities next year is to kind of figure out some creative ways we can increase the capacity in the building. So far this year, current 8th graders applying to Minuteman from Stow have been about the same as the last couple of years. But there may be some students that are on a waiting list because we have 255 or so applications from the 9-member town 8th graders. And we only have room in the freshman class for at the most 200 students. So we have another 90 out of district applications that are on a waiting list as well. But generally speaking, our planning for next year is we're assuming there's going to be some remote learning still intact. We're going to be having to take safety precautions. We are starting our new animal science program this fall. That's been several years in the works. We've also expanded our engineering and robotics and automation program through a grant, through the Capital Skills Grant, into logistics engineering, and we have space in the building for that. So all in all, this is supposed to be like a 3-minute overview, so I think that's a 3-minute overview. Any questions through the chair?
I suppose where we're on a rolling average, we can expect to see significant increases going forward the next few years as long as we maintain the same level.
I don't think we'll be seeing significant increases because our MSBA capital payments peak in FY22 and 23. In other words, they're really peaking in FY22. They go up slightly in FY23, and then they moderate and begin to come down.
That's good. Thank you.
And this is Alice. I just wanted to point out that the MSBA project is, of course, no surprise to any of us. We've been expecting these capital payments for, I think it's a decade.
Mm-hmm. Any questions from the board? No? Jim?
Okay, then I will ask Brooke if you are ready. And Brooke, do you want me to run your presentation or will you be doing it?
Sure, if you don't mind doing it, that would be really quick, and that will, I don't know if I can do 3 minutes, but I'll do my best.
Sure. I mean,
I don't
once,
think I can beat Jim on this one, and I think anyone is. So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. Pat actually just jumped off to head to Bolton, and so you kind of came in and she jumped off to head over there, so she's kind of left me on my own. So I'm going to go through this very, very quickly. This presentation actually is going to be going before our own school committee tomorrow night, and so if you're looking for more information tomorrow night, I'm just going to go through the really salient points tonight. But certainly this will be, if it's not already posted, it'll be posted tomorrow. And like I say, we'll go through it in greater detail tomorrow night. So Denise, I'm really gonna go through super quickly. The expenditure budget, basically our increase right now is about a 1.71% increase from last year. And this includes about $1 million from E&D as a revenue source for us. This basically leaves us with still about $1.8 million in cuts that we are going to have to make between now and April. So it's for us, it's a very tough budget year, quite frankly. Next, go to the next slide, Denise. Thanks. The assessment increases from last year are as follows. I think if you push, they should pop up. There you go. There's Bolton at 2.94, Lancaster is 3.53, and Denise was absolutely right. Stow's minus 0.42%. Down below, again, I'm not going to read through all of this, but feel free to peruse it tomorrow at your leisure. Just kind of lays out operating budget over the last couple of years, the capital equipment, the lease for our copiers, etc., and debt servicing. And so you can see, for example, where we had just the high school, and then we had, of course, the leaching field and the fuel tank coming online in FY20 and 21. And so that's the differential there between the 19 and 20. Going on to the next page. Yeah, you can. I won't read through all of this, but these were some of our key expenditure points that we need to be aware of. Our health insurance increase was 5%. Transportation is 8.36%. The feasibility study debt right now is projected to be at about $22,500. We are very jealous that Minuteman is at the end of their project and we're just starting ours. And I know that you all know how much work goes into this. And so anyway, we are just now finishing up the eligibility period and are just toggling right about ready to go into that feasibility period. We expect an increase in utilities because we're seeing that right now. And of course, again, that's COVID, right? Because our windows have to be open. We've got the air purifiers going, etc. And so we see, of course, some substitute teachers trending changes. And in all honesty, that's just because we've got so many people out for so many longer periods of time, as opposed to, if somebody has a cold or something like that, they might be up for 1 or 2 days. Of course, we've got people out for 10, 14 days at a time, right, if they're quarantining. So we're definitely seeing some changes, some challenges here for us. Teaching and learning, there are some increases. When you take a look, the executive summary is also posted in the meeting materials for our school committee members. So if you want some really good detail, feel free to go in there. The teaching and learning, you'll see an increase in that particular unit, and that really is due to additional software, instructional software that we had to purchase, and then we will have to continue the licensing. And that really did result as part of our COVID. Part of the COVID responses that we had to put in place for our hybrid kids and our remote kids. On to the next page. Special education, we do have a slight reduction this year, and that will help us out a little bit, but it's not extensive. We are seeing some increases in technology. Of course, we have to increase our bandwidth, the hardware and software. We're not making any unnecessary purchases, but obviously the Chromebooks were huge for us this year, and we've just gotten another major order in. Exactly as Ed had said, we're also looking forward, and we know full well that come September we still are going to have some challenges ahead of us. So we're being very proactive with that. Athletics, mostly there are reductions as a result of COVID challenges. Everything else we level funded for that. You'll see the elementary schools, because we have the movement to the full day pay increase, but then that was also offset exactly as we had anticipated with the Chapter 70 monies that came in to help offset that. On to the next page, thanks. I won't take your time with this, but again, you'll be able to see this and take a quick look at it. It just kind of gives you a brief snapshot of some of the key budget drivers. The next page. Budget increases over the 5-year trend. It kind of shows where we've been at, and then there's some assessment changes, again, 5-year trend, and you can see Stow there over. You folks have done particularly well, comparatively speaking, to the other two towns who have been struggling a little bit, and you guys, again, this year did really, really well in terms of benefiting from where we had to land to help our other communities. Next page, please. Thanks. And this is just the 5-year rolling foundation enrollments, and you heard Ed speak about that earlier. And for us, it's 5 years, and that kind of gives you an idea of where we're at for all of the rolling foundation enrollments. There's an operating assessment there. Thank you. An operating assessment there. I would encourage you to take a look at as well. This is a revenue by source. For most of this, we know most of these right now, or we have a good idea. For example, as you all know, when House 1 numbers come in, that gives you a really good flavor of where you think you're going to be headed. But we all know that probably won't really know until, I don't know, August, maybe this year, September, it's hard to say. But at least it gives you numbers that you can start to work with. And so these are the numbers as best as we can estimate them to be right at this point in time. The E&D, I just want to speak to that for half a minute. That E&D is something that we've tried so hard to get off that hamster wheel of the E&D. We've been trying since we had the forensic audit done 5 years ago, and it just hasn't worked for us, because in a perfect world we would be off that and not dipping into E&D every year to help as a revenue source for us, but it just hasn't happened. I just want to speak to this page for half a minute. Of course, the extended day revolving, we couldn't run extended day this year, right? We are looking at running it next year, so I don't know that it will be at nearly the extent that we've had in past years. So you'll see some changes in that. The revenue, for example, will be coming in. We didn't have any rental monies coming in this year because of COVID, so COVID did play quite a substantial part in our world. We are grateful for the CARES money that came into the district. The ESSER 1, we're anxious to see where ESSER 2 ultimately lands on Beacon Hill, and we have our eyes right now on ESSER 3. So in a nutshell, that's kind of where we're at. I think I did it in 3 minutes, but it might have taken 4 or 5. So that's where we're at right now. So happy to answer any questions. Like I say, Pat's not here, so if it's a real detailed question, I'll have to go back and get the answer from her and bring it forward. But I'm certainly happy to take any questions you've got.
Megan?
I have a question. Hi, Brooke. Can you just give us a quick overview? I know that you're going to probably go into more detail tomorrow night at the presentation, but where do you anticipate the budget cuts, the 1.8 million that you alluded to?
So that's a great question. We generally try, what we try to do every year is by the April break, we have every year that I've been here, we have had to do this. Like every single year, it's not a fun place to be, quite honestly. I'm not being critical, it's just it's not a good part of the role that anybody enjoys doing, and that's certainly for sure. But we try to do this by the April break so that people have time and they know as of the April break that they won't have a position that they're coming back to. This year too, that what's in there is we still anticipate that we'll see changes, and we do every year. I think this year we'll probably see even more changes, because as people go through this difficult year, we see people saying, I don't know if I want to come back and do this anymore. And I understand that. Okay? It's been a really, really tough year if you're a teacher and administrator. So, we've seen people taking leaves that I can see deciding that leave just might extend to a resignation. So I think that there's still some moving pieces at play still in there. One of the things too that that will make a difference to us is we are going into negotiations for the CBA for our unions, and so I think that will also that could shoot that number, that 1.8, either up or down depending on where negotiations ultimately land. So that's still a factor for us. When I say about resignations too and retirements, Sometimes, of course, there is, not always, but very often, there's some savings between somebody who's retiring and somebody that you're bringing in. So that also makes a difference to that number. So that's not necessarily a cut, but it's an efficiency that's out there that you are able to glom onto when you have those kinds of things happen. So we've got, of the 1.8, we definitely have some of that already kind of earmarked with the, a sense of where it might go, but we won't really know until we get closer to April. Other questions?
Alan?
Could you, I didn't see, a lot of the cuts you talked about are COVID related, so could you just speak to how much in funding you got this past year, and then I don't see it in the budget in terms of anticipating the offset.
No.
There's a lot of money coming into the district, so we're gonna play that game still, you're not gonna tell us? You
No,
did get money this
well,
past
actually,
year.
it's not a game, it's just that we just don't know. For example, and I know that I'm meeting with the TAs tomorrow, town administrators tomorrow. I'm not sure where ESSER 2, for example, is going to land. And although, for example, ESSER 2 on paper looks good for the school district, part of that will fall back into the communities. And I mean, we've had webinars, but I don't know, Denise, if the municipal association has had webinars yet for municipal leadership or not. So I think that it's still also working its way through Beacon Hill. So it's not that there's a game, it's just that we don't know, and we would never, ever try to build a budget on what ifs. So we have to go with what we know. Does that answer the question? I wanna
No,
make sure.
it doesn't, actually. I mean, I was on school committee, and the whole state aid is always up for grabs, we always have a number in there on the budget. So the fact that, I mean, how much did you get this past year for COVID-related money? I don't know what it was called, was it
So the school was different from the CARES Act, they received a different, they were more grant funded.
okay.
And I don't know off the top of my head what the school got, but Brooke, you might have that.
No, that would be a Pat thing. She could tell you off the top of it. And it really, it was money that was, basically, it was like remuneration. It was money that we had already spent that we were able to, it wasn't like there was a drop of a couple $100,000 into your lap and you got to spend it. It was always charged back against money that you could legitimately say this money was to spend as a result of COVID.
Right, and you listed, almost everything you listed as expenses, drivers this year to the budget are things related to COVID, and we know that there's gonna be some money, so I'm just wondering, if you could tell.
Unless you may know something that we don't know, we don't have any idea right now of what those amounts are going to be. Like none. Unless Denise, you know something I don't know.
I don't know specifics, so in the call I had today with the Lieutenant Governor, they said that there is a federal aid package expected that will mean $2.3 billion for the 351 communities. How that breaks down, I don't know, and I don't know that we will know until they actually receive that funding. But there is expected to be more money, when and how.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I think that sometimes is missing, and I was thinking that today as I was listening to the governor's presser, is that most often, well, certainly the money that's been funneled down thus far has followed Title I route. And if you've been sitting on that school committee before, then you know full well that the only community that is Title I is Lancaster. And we don't get very much money, and so our percentage is not all that high with regards to some of that money. So that wasn't mentioned at all today in the presser, and I thought that's a huge piece to miss. So I would want to make sure that people understood that so far is how it's followed.
Any questions from
Now,
you?
I can't see who's asking the question, but I can certainly have Pat send something off to Denise, and she can forward the email to you in the next day or two with the CARES money.
That would be helpful, Brooke, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And actually ESSER 1 as well, we could do CARES and ESSER 1.
So, any questions from anybody? More? Thank you, Brooke.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Tom. Tom, this is,
Hi, Rich.
hey, I wanted to just make one comment. That you may know, this is, the superintendent is retiring at the end of this year, so I just wanted to take a moment to personally thank her for her service, and I thought perhaps the board may want to say something too.
That's,
Well, not necessary, but thank you very much, Rich. I appreciate you saying something. Thank you. It's a great school district. It's a fantastic school district.
and we've had a very nice run with you, Brooke, so thank you very much for your time and your leadership at the school.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much. Good luck with the rest of your meeting, and I thank you so much, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke.
Thanks. So I guess if there are no other questions or comments, that concludes my financial state of the town for fiscal '22.
Thank you.
All right.
Nice job.
Very good. Next up, we have hopefully a brief meeting with the Community Preservation Committee, but I expect it may go a little bit longer. So who do we have on from the Community Preservation?
Vin, Krista, we have some members on from the committee.
Hi. If you don't know me, I'm Ben Ansell. I'm the chairman of the Community Preservation Committee. And I don't have any slides, but on page 50 of the meeting packet is a short statement and some figures that go along with why we're here. And as you probably know, CPC has received several applications this year. It's been a busy winter. And in particular, the Stow Acres application and the Town Hall restoration application. Looking at the Town Hall restoration project as a whole, we certainly cannot fit both of these projects into this coming year. We have a couple smaller projects, which shouldn't be too distracting. And also the Hallett Point project, which back in September, we made a commitment to support if they were able to raise the money. And as you can see, the vast majority of the project, not the vast majority, but over half the project is going to be from outside money, other funds, including $100,000 in private fundraising that the Lake Boone Association and Stow Conservation Trust have been meeting. And that's a project where, I feel like we do have a commitment if they are able to raise that money to move forward with. This isn't just a question of this coming year, but the spending down the CPC fund on large projects could affect us in a couple of years, the next couple of years. If we go ahead with Stow Acres, there's probably going to be a phase 2. And there are also some other projects in the wings that may come forward to us. So we've been talking quite a bit about how to get through this bottleneck. We have a very healthy fund, and it replenishes pretty strongly, but including both Stow Acres over the next 2 years and Town Hall restoration is is a tight squeeze. And, you know, I guess, I'm here and we're here to listen as much as to talk. And, you know, we'd like to hear what your thoughts on these projects are, and particularly how to deal with the town hall restoration project, and the fact that it is a big budget project that really does limit CPA's funding for other activities over the next couple of years if we could move ahead with it. Does anyone have some comments or thoughts on that?
Jump in now.
Well, I have a more of a bigger question, but is more, you know, sort of the way the capital planning has over the years had a sort of a 5-year outlook in terms of what might be coming up. Does CPC do a similar thing where you know, I mean, given the sort of town priorities, what you see might be coming down the road so you can put things in context?
Yeah, we have been attempting to do that. Of course, it's hard because, you know, until the projects we get an application for a project, we don't know what's coming down the road. But we went through an exercise. I have the sheet here, and my memory is such that I can't rattle off each project. I'm sure one of my mini mates would. Let's see. But
mention the projects that we think are coming down the road, is that what you're?
Like, you know, we had a study done on track road improvement, and, you know, when we do a study, usually there's a request that follows up.
Right, we've done a spreadsheet that has some different projects that we've kind of heard about, or assume, or are estimating that is gonna come up, like Ben said, like a study, that it will probably be, yeah. So some of them would be potentially track road construction. We've heard things about soccer fields, also Stow Acres having different phases, West School, the library, and also some housing on Red Acre Road potentially. So those are some of the ones that we had talked about in some of our meetings.
Now, one positive thing about the reserve bucket system with the CPA is that when we've been looking at our numbers, we have not been including looking at our numbers in terms of Stow Acres and the town hall, we have not been including the money set aside for affordable housing. And so that bucket is not usable for either of those projects. And yet there may be a need for it, particularly if the housing at Red Acres Road starts moving ahead. But yes, we have been looking at future projects.
Because I guess, I mean, that's, and it's both in terms of the specifics, but also I guess the sort of bigger, like the balancing act of, you know, knowing that there's the 3 buckets. And I know some of the money is put into those buckets, but just in general. Like, for instance, we've been talking probably for 20 years about the fear of what happens when the golf courses get sold, you know, in terms of what it would do to the town. And so it just seems like, and even some of the bigger farms that we've always assumed, and in fact, it was sold almost that way when we did CPA, I think initially was, you know, we want to be ready so that if something like that happens, we'll have funds to protect at least part of it. And it feels a little like it's so reactive right now, there's not a lot of, I mean, we don't know, I mean, nobody can predict what projects are going to come up, but I guess I feel like a little, I wonder sometimes, like for instance with Halleck Point, is that the best conservation land option that we have for this year? I mean, how do you guys think about it in terms of the big picture as opposed to just, well, this is the proposal that came to us? I just need to understand more your thinking.
Yeah, I think it was not, we were surprised that the town hall project came to us. We kind of, at least I was, I can't speak for the whole community on that. I thought that it would be a little later than it showed up. And back in September, when the Halleck Point project came to us, we were very impressed by the relative cost of how much CPA money would go into the project versus money from other sources. And, we're putting in $400,000, but $600,000 is coming in from other sources. So it was seen as, a good deal, dollar per dollar, a good deal. And that was one reason we committed to that, is that it was not knowing that these other projects were going to appear this year. So, does that answer your question?
That helps, yeah.
Bob Larkin, can I make a comment?
Sure.
The town hall restoration, we have never funded 100% any of those projects. It's always been a joint effort to go back in our history. So when you get a $3.5 million project, that's gonna bite into it big time. We really needed to look at other sources than just CPC for that project. That's my 2 cents.
Well, and on the town hall, I mean, and we've had this discussion a couple times here, it seems like there's still not a clear plan for what the building is gonna be used for. So, I would never support spending that kind of money when we don't know exactly what's gonna happen with it. I think they need another year, personally, but you did ask for our opinion, so I'll just say it right now. I think that one's gotta wait. But you guys are on the committee,
We're on the committee, so.
Town hall restoration, I'm here.
As are we. Go ahead.
So I'd just like to make a comment from my experience on CPC, and that was that I never felt, I felt as though there were people that were getting ready to make an application would occasionally communicate with us a little bit ahead of time, but we actually brought our deadline for applications back a little bit so that we wouldn't hit a bottleneck against town meeting warrant, because there was a year we had a bunch of snowstorms and it was very difficult to actually just do the work. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, I don't think, at least recently, there's been a culture of a broader discussion about projects and their funding and how we all want to, more of a collaborative approach, like what we saw with the Stow Acres presentation just now, would be really helpful if, as a town, we sort of had a way of looking at things. I agree with you. I always felt a little bit like we were sitting ducks. And CPC is kind of, they put out a call for projects a couple of times a year. And so, as a committee, they're asking for input. They're asking, let us know what's going on. And it sort of happens, it's very often a town committee or board and so just kind of comes right near the deadline.
Right. But you described something like the cultural council. It's like, a call for proposals. Mm-hmm. But this is huge money. Right. So it seems like, we as a town, and I totally agree, we as a town should be setting some larger priorities so CPC knows what we should be working sort of within some context.
So I guess we have like a master plan, right? And we have an open space plan. And I would think that those are things that we would apply. I know that anytime we get a request for open space, that it is compared against the open space plan, and the ranking that was done many years ago on various properties around town as to their open space and recreation value. Personally, I think it'd be really useful to have that for other types of projects. I think it'd be really useful to assess our historic buildings and all our buildings and figure out what, you know, I mean, we've got things that are unused and somewhat derelict that need to be addressed. And we should eventually make a plan, you know, talk about stuff and say, well, we're gonna tear that down, we're gonna put affordable housing there, we're gonna, you know, what are we gonna do? And I think that would help a lot. It would help the CPC a lot because they'd have a context, a different context. So rather than dictating to them or saying yay or nay, I think creating the conversation for the context would be awesome.
Can I give an example with this is Dan Barstow, I'm a member of the Lake Boone Commission, and I have been involved in the Halleck Point Initiative, and I think your points are really well taken. It's very important to be strategic here, and I just want to give in this as one example how the health of the lake has come at risk over the past few years. We've seen algae blooms and other kinds of things have to shut down the lake. This is part of Stow's strategic plan to maintain the health of the lake. We did apply for a grant and received a grant of $154,000 to study the health of the Lake Boone, to do a comprehensive set of measurements. And within this context, we've identified that this chance to acquire it at a remarkably good price, the Halleck Point, and save it from further development, it was clearly a strategic priority. So we have a steering committee that meets weekly to work on fundraising. We've developed around the lake, some 70 or so people have donated to fulfill their portion of this. And we're trying to really integrate this in comprehensively into a sort of a strategic plan. And the CPC funding for that is just a portion, but it's one that we're trying to, I think, put into place exactly what you're saying, to have this part of, to think strategically for the town for any of these initiatives.
Thank you.
I'd like to raise a point, if I may.
Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, I think there is an important distinction between the town hall and some of these other projects, and that is that it's owned by the town, right? The town is ultimately responsible for what happens to that building. So we can choose to do what we like, but it's not, we're not acquiring something else. We are actually, that is our building. So we have to, take care of it, don't take care of it, do what you like. But you can't, it's not categorically the same as acquiring open space. I think it's in a different category.
May I add into this?
Go ahead, Doug.
If the board recalls, 3.5 to 4 years ago, you commissioned a study of all of the town buildings. And so in a sense, a master plan was created. And the select board at the time supported the findings that the town hall needed to be saved. We've gone to CPC twice for funding. We've gone to town meeting twice for funding. So realistically, we were going to be coming to CPC last year for funds, but we fell out of favor with our engineering firm, and now we're moving forward again. So I think everybody knows that it's been coming. It's a project that is getting more and more desperate by the day as you walk through the building. If we choose to kick it down the street for another year, it's going to be a $4 million project. I think the board should be prepared for Town Hall Restoration Committee to come back to the various committees saying, well, when CPC decides what, if any, level of funding interest they have in the project, we're going to be going to the town meeting looking for funding either through borrowing or whatever method is recommended by Denise and everybody else. But it's a project whose time has come. It's moving quite quickly and nicely, and it just takes a little bit of time for everyone to get their hands around the scope of the project to figure out that it's a valuable project. You know, if you read in the Stow Villager, we get those historical notes from the vault and those other articles. Almost every week there's a mention in those articles about life that happened in the town hall. The one with Hazel Moore 2 weeks ago had 2 different quotes of different functions that were attended there. It was the center of Stow. It is the center of Stow. It's a building that will be used and it's falling apart. So it is its time to be repaired and brought back up to a suitable state. Thank you.
So I know Jim's waiting to speak, and then Erica would like to speak.
Jim?
Well, I think Doug in part did what I wanted to do, which was to bring this back to town hall. I thought the more strategic discussion is valuable, but my reading is that CPC is here with 3 very specific questions, and I think looking for a reaction on town hall. I mean, I'll give you some reaction. I zoomed into a recent CPC meeting, and I had 2 basic reactions to the town hall design. Number one was that the design itself, that the draft design that you have from your current architect is very good. It really seems like you've gotten your money's worth out of this current architect. Eliminating the stairs, fire escape in the front, rather creative thoughts about what to do with the balcony is very good. Personally, I walked away though feeling that the utility of the building, what we get for $3.5 million, is very lacking. The current draft, Stow TV is no longer interested, I guess. The current draft is office space for the Historical Commission. On the bottom floor, a little bit of historical display space and a lot of meeting space, including the Grand Hall. And personally, I just don't know that that says $3.5 million to me. The committee's specific questions deal with sources of funding, and I'm detecting an undercurrent of, would the municipal side be willing to share the cost? And I think that that's something worth thinking about for one important reason. I actually think a debt exclusion for part of the cost here would be a good idea. Normally I wouldn't like that, but one good thing about a debt exclusion, I'm not sure what kind of a consensus there is in town about the current plans for town hall. And with the debt exclusion, if it passes, then we all know there's a consensus that people want to raise your taxes and pay for it. And if it doesn't pass, then we don't pay for it. I think that that should be considered. You have asked some specific questions about bonding against future CPA funds. Personally, I wouldn't feel that this is the project for that. I would not take a religious or philosophical stance against that. I know a lot of CPAs, CPCs do that. But those are my thoughts, trying to address the questions that you brought before us tonight.
One thing that at our last meeting I didn't push too hard about, maybe not thinking fully, is ways that this project can be broken up, not into small bits to get around state regs or anything, but into digestible chunks so that our CPA funds are not drained completely in 1 year or 2 years by a project. And I guess that's something that we'd like the town hall committee to think about hard, and have your architect think about hard. Are there ways to phase this project at all? And I think we've probably asked that before, but it may have been in the context of, well, if we phase it small, we aren't spending a certain amount that is a state limit before certain regs kick in. But that's not what I'm asking here. It's more related to trying to get this into digestible chunks. Might be one way to deal with this. It seems like, well, anyway, I wasn't gonna talk that much.
We did talk about this though.
Ben, one question I've got for you is, what is the current rate of replenishment for the CPA funds?
Yeah.
Well, we had a very good replenishment year this year, so our surcharge in 2020 brought us $650,000, $659 actually. Our state match was $290, and so the total replenishment was $949,000. Of course, some of that goes into buckets that can't be used for either Stow Acres type projects or town hall type projects. But but I think that we have to expect this to be somewhat of an exceptional year, particularly if we're looking at, certainly if we're looking at any debt or bonding. We want to be conservative, but I'd say, I've been looking at 650 as a safe number per year. I don't know if other people, and that's just because I'm trying to be conservative about it.
I think Jim brings up an interesting concept of splitting some of it potentially into a debt exclusion, for the town hall, something like that, for part of it. But at the same time, I still have heartburn and have had heartburn over $3.5 million for this project for a number of years now. It's one of the things that I'm not sure, if it was my house, I'm not sure I'd put $3.5 million into it. At the same time, I think it's a great building, I really wanna save it, I think it's, it's a big part of Stow's history. But $3.5 million is an awful lot of money for, as Jim said, what we're gonna get out of it. One of the things, part of the reason I asked about the replenishment rate is, and I have resisted for years any kind of borrowing against CPA funds. But potentially a short term, 5 years or something like that, I might be able to be convinced of. But I think it would probably be better to go along the lines of asking the town if they really want to put some money into it, say $1.5 million. It buys you down into the neighborhood where you can do the other things. I'd actually kick the pickleball and cane trail system down the road a little bit. Those could be looked at later on. But if and I think the Stow Acres acquisition is probably a priority from my standpoint. I'm just speaking for myself, not for the board, but, so, and then Halleck's Point is probably, second priority. So, you've already, made a commitment to that. I think the town hall restoration may have to figure out how to ask for some money from another way. I really want to save that building. But those are my 2 cents worth.
You wanna speak to?
Yeah.
Because other funding sources that we've looked into.
So, town hall committee's meeting tomorrow night, and on our agenda is again to look at a funding package and to reconsider, or that's I don't remember how the agenda was worded, but to discuss our request for funding. my 2 cents on the town hall, I get the sense from some of the examples of similar projects that architects gave us when we were looking for this current firm. I feel like this project is in context with the cost of renovating a building like this. And I feel like this project is for the future. It is for the best possible maintenance or sort of resuscitation of this building for any future use. And by doing this, it could, we don't know. It's an asset that we have. And, it's like saying, well, I'm gonna be 60, I don't have any kids, I'm just not gonna really fix my house, because I'll just kind of make sure the roof is okay, because that's all that really matters. When I'm gone, they can burn it down. I know you're not really saying that exactly, but this is our town. It's front and center. It's beautiful, and it's an icon for us. And inside, it's also that. And it's, I just feel like I need to be the champion of the small users. Scouts and yoga classes and other children's groups are in there. Adults are in there doing a variety of things as well, which might also be just, they're not a $3.5 million thing, but it's the fabric of our town. We spend gobs of money on schools, we spend, money on all sorts of other things, and so this is just one of the pieces of our town. And it's a piece of our town context. It's the character of our town as we drive through, as other people drive through. Oh, I'm in Stow, there's those columns. So, and if the architect, who is lovely, tells us that this is a reasonable cost, then that's our choice. It sort of becomes binary about whether we do it. So that's from my heart. I also see that it's not, it doesn't work with many things to just ask for $3.5 million out of CPC. So I think it's appropriate to look at other ways to break the funding up. Personally, I think it might be interesting if we were going to talk about bonding or some kind of debt exclusion, because that requires a 2/3 vote anyway, and land purchase requires a 2/3 vote. I wonder if it's reasonable to consider having that go with the Stow Acres project. I, as a conservation-minded person, think that's a shoo-in, and I could be crazy. It could be that people say, heck, we've got so much green space, why do we need another drop of it? But it feels to me, again, like another iconic piece of town, and so it seems to me to put things together that are like, if you need a 2/3 vote for this anyway, then the funding doesn't require it to have an extra impetus. Whereas the town hall, you're saying, well, this will tell us whether people care or not, and that's true. It is true. So, my 2 cents on that. I guess keeping this brief, I should probably pass the talking stick.
Well, I think this is exactly what Vin's looking for.
Yeah.
Megan.
So as far as, I just started on this committee right after getting sworn in June. And so I sort of came in thinking similarly to Tom. It's got a huge sticker shock, and I think the tricky thing we've talked about this year is that because of COVID, we can't see how that building is going to be used, right? So nobody's using the building right now. Why are we gonna spend $3.5 million on a building that nobody's using? I do think that we have talked about challenging ourselves to think about how we could use the building. Can we rent it out? Could we have wedding receptions there? Could we have, you know, other small town events there? How do we best utilize that space for that sticker price? I know that we have looked into, and I believe, Doug, you can speak to, we submitted a grant for ADA funding. Did I? Yes. And we have an ADA compliance officer or somebody certified in that now. And we have taken some steps in order to be able to apply for some grant funding. I know also that the Historical Commission was supposed to be sending a letter trying to figure out if we can get that building on the registry. Because if we can get it on the registry, because if there is actually a historical component to it, then we should be eligible for some state funds. And so I think the tricky thing is, on top of everything else, the building is falling down, right? So at some point, we need to shore the building up. And I think there's a lot of different things, sort of, what I'm realizing are converging at once that are making it sort of like, yes, we do need to spend this money now to get this building to where it needs to be, but I completely also understand that it's hard to have a vision of what we can use the building for when we can't actually really use the building right now. And it hasn't been used for a few years as much as it was in the past because it has been falling down. And so I think what we're challenged with is, at least as a committee, and then is sort of, you know, what do we do with that? And I have asked that question sort of every single time I've gone into the meeting, like, do I want to champion this project? Do I not want to champion this project? And I think it is a lot of money, but it is going to be a 100-year project is how I'm looking at it, right? And so the idea is to get the building so that it doesn't fall down. And so we want to do it the right way so that we can use it for generations to come. So that's sort of how I've been looking at it. As far as the list of projects, having served on planning board as an associate member for a couple of years, Stow Acres is, I think, a top priority for me. Knowing what potentially could go into that spot and knowing that you've got the developer who is willing to work with the town on this is like a golden situation, and I think that we should take advantage of it. Halleck Point, I was part of the of putting together the subdivision for that area, and I know that the planning board thought very, very, very thoughtfully about how many lots would go in and keeping a conservation mind to how it would affect the lake as well. So I feel strongly that even if you did not go with Halleck Point, that I do feel like the way that development was put together was in a thoughtful way. It's not, they were limiting the number of docks. There was all sorts of things written up in it. So I know that you all, and I also am the Lake Boone committee rep as well, so I'm well aware of that. So anyway, that's my 72 cents, but I hope that helps a little bit.
Ellen, any more comments on that?
Sorry.
Well, I would reiterate, or underscore what Mike said about Stow Acres. I think hands down, especially because that's an offer from the landowners. When does that ever happen, And so I would strongly encourage both the CPC and town residents to support that. I think their presentation was extraordinary. The teamwork that went into creating that proposal was just great. I did have a question, because Vin, you said that wouldn't be eligible for any of the affordable housing money, but I thought there is an affordable housing component, and you were
That's what I was
Eventually.
asking.
eventually.
Not the phase one, not this year.
Oh, okay, so the way the phasing is going, okay. All right, so this pot of money couldn't come out of affordable, but it might, the second phase might. Is that what?
That's right,
Okay.
depending on what kind of housing ends up being built.
Gotcha.
And I see that Bob Wilbur has his hand up,
Yeah.
you may not see that.
No, Erica's been waiting to speak since the
Oh.
beginning
right.
of the finance
Yeah.
committee chair, so I'd like to ask if you
Yep.
could.
And then Bob.
You can hold on for a couple minutes, Bob. Erica?
Sure thing, absolutely.
Thank you. Yes, most of you actually have already answered my question, but I guess I was hoping to hear a little bit more about how you felt about bonding out CPC funds. And Jim and Tom sort of touched on how they felt about that, but I think a bunch of us are interested on how you feel about that, seeing as it's something we have not done in the past.
My personal opinion is we shouldn't do it unless it's under extreme circumstances and for very short periods of time. But I've resisted it for the last 20 years, and I'm probably not inclined to change my mind right now. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, and I'm opposed to it, especially now when I just feel like I have this fear that because the state budget being dicier than usual, you know, I would never want to plan on anything right now that's coming from the state in terms of the match. I'd rather see something like a debt exclusion over bonding future money and future taxes. I mean, we have to remember, this is people's tax money that we're doing. It's not like it's just a random pot of money, and I think if we're gonna start bonding over people's future tax bills, I don't like it.
And I'm opposed to it only because, especially right now, knowing that we've got a high school coming down the pike and we've got other things that I don't, for a lot of the reasons that Ellen said as well. I think I'm a little risk averse on that one.
My opinion on bonding CPA funds is a little based on what I heard the committee, their reception, the CPC talking about it, which was, I heard a lot of concern about how it would constrict their funds going forward. And so I feel like Tom makes a good point that if you were to do it, it might be best for a short term for a portion, you know, for a smaller amount, not for like $3.5 million. I do think that it could be looked at as the quote bucket amount for each year that it was extended out. So if you had a 5-year bond and you had that payment could be, you know, chosen to be not to exceed the 1/3 of CPA funds for that year, which would be, you know, you have 3 buckets: historical, open space, and affordable housing. And so if you were doing a historic project, you would only use the historic's, you know, 1/3 of the total income for the year. Possibly could be an approach.
Jim, thoughts?
Yeah, just to reiterate, if we're talking about CPA funding, I'm not philosophically or religiously opposed to, I think, government and especially private business bond based on all sorts of revenue streams. Some of the objections I've heard to it, that it varies is too close to the CPA, CPC. I don't have a problem with it. We've had it for 20 years. I don't think we're likely to get rid of it. That being said, I don't know that any of the current projects, certainly not the town hall project, is something I would want to see done for. It would be something we do only for the most important projects in the next city council. I suppose maybe it's still open to that's all. I wouldn't take it off the table.
That answer your question, Erica?
Yes, thank you very much.
Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bob Wilbur, President of the Stow Conservation Trust. I want to say a couple of things. One, I just want to say I really appreciate the remarks. I believe it was Select Person Sturgis about Stow Acres and the process. I appreciate that very much. And so speaking as the leader of the local land trust in town, I just want to say as strong as I can that the two projects, the two open space projects that we're discussing tonight, Halleck Point and Stow Acres, are without question the two most important
opportunities in front of the Stow as a community currently. And as land conservation goes, you often do need to react quickly. You can plan to some degree. Reaching out to Stow Acres was the amount of planning that we could do to be proactive and engage them and ask them to engage in a cooperative planning project. And that project really does have, if it stays on the track that it's on now, it will have extraordinary benefits for the town with really tremendous open space outcome, really high quality active recreation, additional capacity, housing production of exactly the type that our community needs most at this moment of time and going forward. The potential to become immune from the potential impacts of a 40B for a number of years going forward, perhaps even close to a decade going forward. Ongoing golf has been such a huge part of the heritage of our community. Even historic preservation. Stow Acres is in the 100th year in 2021. And as some of you heard, the national championship for black men was held there in the 1920s. And that's something we should be very proud of. And so, absolutely historic significance for Stow Acres. And Halleck Point, just to talk about that for a moment, actually, we're going to step back and just say that, in part speaking as a former chair of the Community Preservation Committee, and the one who helped bring CPA to Stow back in 2001. I think one of the really good approaches is the approach that Chairman Ansel is following, which is value and essentially impact per dollar. And one of the ways you get that is by having multiple funding sources brought to bear. And so for Halleck Point, I think the community, those who were looking at that when the right of first refusal, the chance to purchase that property, a 7-lot subdivision for $1 million on the lake, we thought, wow, that looks like it might be a pretty good value. At this point in time, 8-9 months later, it's an extraordinary value. There's no question, it's an extraordinary value. The actual market value of that is probably at least twice in current terms. And so for something that may be worth $2 million or more, the town's investment from CPA funds, $400,000, it's a small fraction of that outcome. And it as Dan Barstow said, that outcome will serve multiple important things, including helping the health of the lake long term. It will also provide an opportunity for non-lake residents, those who don't own land on the lake or near the lake, to be able to go visit the lake and experience the lake and benefit from it. Really, so many benefits coming from that. So that's really also a really great project. The last thing I wanted to say is just in terms of the Community Preservation Act in general. And I think all of us should feel somewhat emboldened that the state matching funds coming down the pike in future years will remain strong. And the reason I say that is because after 20 years of CPA campaigns and CPA enrollment across the state, 186 communities of the 365 have enrolled, and that's almost exactly 50%. But I did a little calculation this afternoon to figure out what percentage of the residents of Massachusetts are now enrolled in CPA, and it's 65%, so 2/3 essentially. And And that includes cities like Boston, Cambridge, Springfield, Lowell, Greenfield, Holyoke, Pittsfield, West Springfield, and Westfield. Some would say that's a bad thing because they take so much of the match. I don't look at it that way. I think that's a very good thing because that gives you political clout. And that political clout was shown just in the last year where the increases to the deed surcharges were made, bringing the CPA trust fund, which is the source of the state matching funds, that went from 24 million to 60 million with the deed excise increases. And so I think we can be reasonably confident that when additional funds are needed, they will be found. 2/3 of the residents of Massachusetts are now in this and will be lobbying, including those big cities that I mentioned. So I just want to put that out there if that's helpful for context.
Thanks, Bob. I think it's probably time to move this along a little bit. I think that, Vin, do you kind of have a feel that you're probably, or did you get the input that you were looking for, I hope?
I think we did, particularly on the bonding issue. There are a few things. I know that the town hall committee's meeting tomorrow, is it?
Mm-hmm.
So there are probably a few things that we left unsaid at the last meeting, but I think this idea of phasing, maybe particularly because of what Doug said about the condition of the building, are there ways that short money can be put in the short term to keep that from the cost from growing? Because I think our issues here are more of a bottleneck issue than a lack of resources over the long term. It's difficult to have the town hall and either phase 1 or phase 2 of Stow Acres happening 2 years in a row. I heard what Doug said, but somehow maybe if they could look at a year delay and whether that would really increase the cost that much, because in terms of spreading the cost out, there's the political support that has to be rallied, and there is maybe some fundraising avenues that still need to be checked out. But I'm not talking for the committee right now, I'm talking for myself. And so hopefully those things can be looked into. I think we are happy with what we heard. I think
you've still got some tough decisions, but
at
least you have a better idea where we stand, so. All right.
Yes, but they are good decisions to have because most, it's a opportunities as opposed to anything else. So.
Right.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Vin.
Thank you.
Thank everybody who participated in this. Much appreciated. And off to town administrators report.
Yes. So we'll start with everyone's favorite topic of COVID. I'm happy to say that if folks didn't see last week, Stow has been downgraded to the gray level. We have been slowly declining with our numbers, which is fantastic, and thankfully we have some of the lowest in the area, which is really great for us. By now, folks know that the vaccines are open for residents 65 and older and those that have 2 identified comorbidities. Another 60,000 appointments will be released on Thursday morning. So the state has said in their call with us today that they have worked on their technology and hope to be ready for this Thursday's round of appointments. Last Wednesday, I know the board is aware of this, but the governor's office confirmed what they've been stating for some time now, that they are stopping all of the 351 local vaccination clinics, if you will. There will be no vaccines provided to local municipalities. They are encouraging their mass vac centers or regional efforts. They are encouraging large regional efforts. I met again on Friday. In your packet and correspondence is the first letter that the 16 Nashoba community sent to the governor and Department of Public Health. We have another letter that was finalized today that will be going out sort of in response to the changes that were implemented last week. Quite candidly though, in our conversation on Friday with the 16 communities, meeting the requirements of 750 appointments a day, 5 days a week is a tough ask. You know, we've been utilizing, or the plan would be to utilize Devon's. The executive director of Devon stated that they cannot accommodate that type of volume, even with the hotels on the property. So we have a couple of different options that we've been looking into. But the requirement is, and the state is adamant that it's, again, 750, 5 days a week. It cannot be limited appointments to our region only. We would have to open it up to all state residents that want to participate. And it has to be maintained and consistent through the remaining phases of this rollout. So we talked about who can provide staff, who could provide resources. In reality, you're talking 30 people on average every day. And all of us collectively have decided we don't have it, even with MRCs, with volunteers, with staff, it's a big ask. But we are still working on it. We are still having conversations. We are asking we are one of many communities and one of many regions that are asking the state to reconsider. They made it pretty clear today they don't have any intention of reconsidering that, but we will continue to ask and do our part to try and get vaccinations closer to this area. I know the Worcester one, I've heard great things about that so far. It's very seamless. People have liked going there that are local. That's probably the closest one at this point. They are still looking at different parts of the town, of the state, and looking at sort of the map to figure out where the holes are that they can fill in with some regional sites. As you know, Natick opened last week and Dartmouth is opening, I think it's this week. Those are the next two that they're rolling out while they continue to figure out what's next on the state level. Did you have a question on that?
Well, no, Natick is actually closer, I think, for most of us than Worcester,
yes.
so.
And actually, Natick, I don't know if you saw in the news, the day they opened, they pretty much sat quiet because no one either knew about it or no one went.
Yeah.
So, yes, Thursday mornings, they release all the appointments for the week, for the following week, and 60,000 new appointments will be added this coming Thursday. Joyce, our new executive assistant, is beginning on Monday, which is fantastic. So I look forward to having her on board and having her start, which will really be great. I keep putting a pile of projects together for her, so it's really great.
Don't drive her away on the first day.
We'll send the
There are, for those of you who have not seen our website, there are 2 short surveys on our website that I would encourage folks to take advantage of. I've been working with the Nashoba Area Social Justice Alliance, as have several other department heads and employees, regarding improving diversity in Stow. We have a 1-question survey for that on our website. Additionally, the Town Hall Restoration Committee put together a survey to get feedback on the Town Hall project, which will ultimately help in, their decisions regarding going forward and how to best go forward with that project. So it's a short survey. Again, I encourage folks to take advantage of those and provide some feedback to us. I would like to echo what was said earlier and commend, Jesse, Kathy, and all the others who put together and presented the Stow Acres visioning discussion. It was very well done, very well thought out, and I thought really presented well on the evening, that Wednesday evening. I think it was great to see so many people participate and engage. I've heard nothing but positive responses to it. We've gotten a lot of great feedback. I think it is a really great project for the community. And I think it really will benefit so many people. Lastly, I would like to recognize the employees in the Council on Aging who have been working tirelessly to assist our seniors with COVID vaccines, from registering folks to finding appointments and providing rides. They have really been doing a tremendous job assisting however many people they can. I will tell you that in some of Allison's outreach, it's been reassuring to know that there are a large number of our seniors that have been vaccinated. So we have provided probably 75 through the town with Nashoba. Again, that's all sort of stopped as of Monday. But they're still helping other seniors register. I mean, as much as they're taking pictures of their insurance cards and sending them to themselves and uploading them on the website, and they're just doing a tremendous job down there with this effort. So I really want to recognize them and the work that they do. And that is all I have for my report.
All right. Next up, liaison reports. And we can start with Jim since he's not here.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Just want to make sure you were still awake, Jim.
Yeah, I'm here. Hey, I'm petting the dog. I got the best.
Yeah, you do.
I think you've heard a lot about my assignment. Finance Committee had a very introductory meeting. I actually didn't make it. Denise did. But really good just getting geared up. Had a very similar discussion. Capital Planning had its first meeting with Building and Fire a couple weeks ago. This Thursday we meet again. One project I want to kind of highlight for the board, sort of flying under the radar, at least it was for me. Building Projects is bringing forward $30,000 for design funds to design replacement of the water pipe that runs from Town Building down Crescent Street, jogs down Library Hill Road, then goes all the way down Common Road. I think some of you know, it serves not just Town Buildings, but a couple of houses, the church. And that's design. Capital Planning asked the building department to go back, talk to the town administrator about assessing the scope of that. The overall project, it seemed to us it's possible that we could help some of the people on that line sink their own wells with PFAS treatment for less money. Maybe that's not true, but I just wanted you all to be aware of that. Stow TV hasn't met. Library Building Committee meets next week, meeting with Kate Hogan about the possibility of state funds, but that doesn't look good. And I think that's it.
And why don't we go to Megan?
Well, Town Hall Restoration Committee meets tomorrow night, Planning Board is meeting tonight. The high school will be going remote, or not remote, they'll be going hybrid on March 1st. And so that's gonna be a change, because they've been fully remote up until now. And that is all I have.
Courtney.
Conservation Commission has got a contractor for the Lake Boom water assessment project. So it's kind of a joint project. Open Space Committee, I think, is probably somewhat focused on the Stow Acres project, and that's about what I've got.
So Council on Aging, I echo what Denise said, they've been working really hard. Recreation hasn't met, we heard it from Minuteman directly. There's a couple, MMA, the Mass Municipal Association and MAPC are having almost too many seminars. I think they're taking a little too much advantage of the fact we can all go to these Zoom calls. But a couple of them, I just wanted to mention the Mass Select Boards Association, which is a subset of MMA, is doing a webinar promoting civil discourse in public meetings. And I just thought I would just mention that. We've actually having a good time here, but if anybody thought it was worth, having that, that's on March 12th.
Send it down to Washington.
Was that?
Send it down to
Yes,
Washington.
yeah, I know, right? But it's always good to have, it's only an hour, and so I was gonna forward it to the office and have it forwarded out to you guys, cause I just, you never know. And then the other one that was, there's actually two, one was on, I think this one I mentioned to Jesse, there's actually some new funding around housing choices that the Lieutenant Governor is gonna be hosting next Tuesday morning, which I can't attend. So anyway,
But I think I can.
oh, you can? Do you get these? Because I
Yes.
always wonder who's getting
Oh, I
what,
get it.
so, okay, all right, well, I'm gonna stop worrying about it then. So, I haven't gone to any more of their meetings recently, I don't think, and if I did, I've forgotten already. And we're not perambulating until the snow melts, so
Oh, good.
we'll be done, when, and it gets warm again, so.
Come on, come on.
I know.
Oh, you mean like tomorrow?
Yeah, like, that's right, I know, I hear this weekend, hey, it's gonna be 50,
I don't know,
we
we
can
have to
uncover
dig
the
in
stones.
Just got mud in my yard.
And I really don't have much, you know, the highway department's been doing a pretty decent job keeping the streets clear, they keep throwing snow in my driveway, such is life. And I try not to throw it back out in the road.
I wanna say, we're really grateful, because we have a dirt road, and when we've had this ice the last few days, it was a nightmare, and they've sanded 2 days in a row, and we're very grateful, so. Thank you, Steve, if
Right.
you're listening.
We've already done minutes. Was there anything in correspondence? I know, Denise mentioned a number of letters relating to COVID stuff. There was one from the contractor that's doing PFAS study for us. I'm assuming, even though it was addressed specifically to me, that you have it in your fine hands because
Yes,
you're copied
Greg
on
is
it.
working most directly with them. I'm involved, I see everything, but that is a statutory requirement that they notify the chief executive officer, which is you. So just so that they can say that they did that, it's in your packet.
Yep, and you guys have all seen it now, so you're all
Yes.
hooked with me. That was, anything else in correspondence? Anybody want to bring up?
I was sorry to see a letter of regret about teachers in some cases taking a leave because they felt unsafe teaching in person, and this was a citizen's regret on the quality of education that they felt was going to be available as a result of that. And if our school committee and school boards can find any way to open up their policy on allowing teachers to work from home, it would make sense to me.
Yeah.
I know we can't really direct them as such, but it just seems like so many people are working from home, why not a teacher?
So I was the one who received that letter
Mhm.
and had it included in correspondence. I did forward it to our school committee. I forwarded it to Denise, I forwarded it to, and I had some conversations with a couple of the school committee members as well. They're all aware of it.
Yeah.
And it's, I understand, I think there's a couple of different layers that go into that, and so I totally understand that. I do think there's some contract issues, I believe are what are at the root of some of that, so, but yes, yes.
Probably enough said at
Thank
this
you.
point. In that case, we've got one item remaining, to go into executive session to talk about, Darren Thraen's, possible contract
Promotion?
ready for a motion.
Okay, I move to convene an executive session pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with Darren Thraen for the position of Lieutenant of the Stow Police Department and to adjourn thereafter.
Second.
All in favor, roll call vote. Megan?
Aye.
Courtney?
Aye.
Ellen?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. So we are now going into executive session and we will not be coming back to open session.